Hey plant nerds, it's Kiri here. We are out in the garden today and we need to talk about powdery mildew because it's hot, it's humid, I have it, it's everywhere. It's doing terrible things to my garden. We need to talk about what it is, how to deal with it, how to get rid of it, and how to prevent it. If you're new around here, I am Kiri. I am a micro homesteader in Zone 5B in Pickering, Ontario, Canada, and I love to grow food. So on this channel, we talk about all things micro homesteading, from growing indoors hydroponically to growing outdoors in the garden, and all sorts of ways that you can become more self-sufficient and reduce your reliance on the grocery store. So if that is your thing, or if you want that to be your thing, then go ahead and hit subscribe and the notification bell so you'll know when I post videos in the future. But today, it's powdery mildew day, and it's everywhere. Powdery mildew's been an issue for probably 3 to 4 weeks for me. I have been getting sidetracked with some other things, so it's a bit out of control, which is bad for me, but good for you because I can show you how to deal with it, what it looks like, and then hopefully you won't have it. I'm gonna flip the camera around and show you what happened to the squash patch. But it's not looking as lush and beautiful as it used to. We're getting it up onto the trellises as well, but it's okay. That's okay. We've still got lots of squash here. It's salvageable. These leaves are looking not too bad. There's still some, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm gonna go deeper into the garden. Can't believe there's a pumpkin right here and another one with one of our bee friends in there, or a couple of bees, I guess. But yield pumpkin that is here started over in that corner on the other side of the trellis. It's kind of insane how big this is. But anyways, we got to deal with the mildew. So it's pretty bad over here. The air conditioner has decided to kick on, so apologies for that. We do have a cute little sugar pumpkin here. And actually, I have to show you my giant pumpkin. Over here, I have a beautiful moringa pumpkin, which I am going to use to make a Brazilian dish. So I'm pretty excited about that guy. I have to harvest that soon. But we have the powdery mildew. It's a fungal disease and probably one of the easiest diseases to diagnose in the garden. Such a unique look. So it looks pretty much like somebody came and they sprinkled flour all over your leaves. So that's when you have the spores that are being produced. At the very beginning, it looks like this. Little yellow dots and speckles all over, and then afterwards you start to get the formation of the spores. If this was left long enough, you would see little black dots that start to appear, and that's actually a harder coating that goes around the spores and will help to keep it through the winter. So this can come back and be an issue for years, so we wanted to make sure we take care of it. Which up to this point, I obviously haven't because it's everywhere. But that's okay because we still have squash. It just really could have been dealt with sooner because it's also spreading because it spreads through the air. So it's pretty much a shit show right now. But we're gonna make it better. Powdery mildew can actually affect over like 10,000 different types of plants. Though my beloved squash and any of the cucurbits are most prone. So I've also got it on my tomatoes this year, and I had some on my peonies. It can also affect onions, strawberries, apple trees, pear trees. Like, this stuff doesn't care. We typically start to see it around midsummer, which is where we're at. We're in the middle of August, and it started to show up probably at the beginning of August, late July. It's going to hit when that humidity starts to go up. It likes temperatures from about 20 to 27 degrees Celsius. I think 68 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Not 100% sure. I'll put it on the screen. And especially humidity around 50 to 90%. So when it's hot and muggy, you're gonna see it start appearing. As I mentioned, it's spread by spores and it reproduces asexually, and it can travel from hundreds of miles. When I was doing some research on this, I was seeing that it was saying that it starts down south and then travels on the wind up north. So they actually get it sooner down south and then it makes its way up here, which is just fantastic. It's important to be clear that this is not an instant death sentence on your plants. As I mentioned, it's on the pumpkins. The pumpkins started over here. They've moved all the way to the other side of the garden. they're still growing. One of the reasons is the vines of the squash are going to root as they go, which kind of keeps it healthier. Well, that said, it's not an excuse to let it get to the state that it's in my garden. I won't be doing this next year. The sooner you deal with it, the less of the impact and the less of the spread. You're not necessarily gonna be able to get rid of it 100%, but we can definitely get it to better than what I'm dealing with at the moment. So while it's not a death sentence on your plants, it is going to tend to stunt them or have them produce less fruit. And it's just, it looks gross too. So like, who wants that in their garden? My research was also indicating that it can change the flavor of the fruit and make them a little less sweet because it's damaging the leaves, and then the plant doesn't have as much ability to produce the sugars, which would get into the fruit that we love. Another reason that we want to keep it under control. Do you see my giant sunflower? I love that thing. I'm gonna go show you. It's like a bee airport. If you're gonna plant anything, I mean, well, definitely make sure that you're planting pollinator plants, but the sunflowers, the bees love it. So powdery mildew is, like I said, it affects the leaves, and it's basically a follicular disease, though that doesn't mean that you won't get it on the stem. If it gets established enough, it can grow on pretty much any part of the plant. That said, the fruit is still edible. It may look a little different, the skin might be affected a tiny bit, and it can change the flavor. Like I said, if there's less leaves, there's less sugars being produced, and the fruit may not be as tasty, but you can still eat it. Like, don't go throwing the fruit away. The other thing about powdery mildew is it can spread fast. Like, in a week, it can take over. Really, really have to be on top of it, which, like I've already acknowledged, I was not this year. Be aware, be present in your garden, look at your plants. It tends to appear also after the fruit has been set. I had most of my fruit already formed before I noticed it start to creep in, which is a good thing because at least they were already started. But as with anything, prevention is the best medicine. It's better to do everything you can to prevent it so that you don't have to deal with it. All of the powdery, white, flowery looking stuff is basically just spores waiting to catch a ride on the next breeze that comes through so that it can jump onto the next leaf and keep its life cycle going. It's here on the trellis as well, but the trellis is pretty much ready to get cleaned off. I have 2 more red curry squash to harvest off of there. The one thing I will say, as much as I love growing the squash on the trellis, and this is the only way I will grow it from now on, I did a whole post on that, I will link that above. It is, plants on the trellis are less able to deal with it from the powdery, to deal with things like powdery mildew from my experience, because as I mentioned, they are going to form roots from the stem. I'm just trying to see if I can see any trying to form on here. Not seeing any right now, and because it's on the trellis, it doesn't have that ability to root into the ground and to stay healthier. That is one thing to consider, but you also have less chance of getting it on the trellis because there's better airflow, but we'll talk about that in a second. Though if you let it get as bad as I did, then it doesn't matter what you're doing, it's gonna get everywhere. Did I tell you how much I love these things? They're so cute. So now we know what powdery mildew is, what it looks like, and how to identify it in the garden. We should talk about ways to prevent it. One of the best ways to prevent it is to have a lot of sunlight, to plant in good sun, which is perfect because most of the cucurbits love the sun. They want 6 to 10 hours of direct sunlight. So plant those babies in the sun and you're already in a good state to prevent the powdery mildew. Mildew tends to grow in the shade. The more that it's in the sun, the better. Number 2 is air circulation. So we're going to want to make sure that we're not planting things too close, which I know is so hard because when you put those plant babies in at the beginning of the season, it looks like there's so much space and you could squeeze 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 more in. Don't do it. Leave the space so that the air can get around, and that will help to control the powdery mildew. One of the great ways, as I mentioned, is growing vertical. So that does help with the air circulation as well. And if you are planting in the ground or in the raised bed, then just make sure you're leaving the proper spacing between plants. Another thing that you can do is to prune the leaves below the fruit. Now, up until this year, I had never really, and I didn't even really do it until later in the season, but I'm definitely going to do it next year. I had never really pruned squash. Pruned tomatoes, but squash, I didn't really know it was a thing. I actually saw it on Charles Dowding channel. I love him. He is awesome. My no-dig guru. He actually was growing his squash vertically, so straight up a string, which is something I haven't tried. I've found it's easier with the trellis, and I will put a link to how to build the cattle pedal trellises above. So if you want to see how to build them, I would strongly recommend it. I absolutely love them. I'm going to be putting in 2 more hopefully for next year. Yeah, so growing the squash vertically and trimming all of the leaves below the fruit. So that's something that I'm definitely going to do next year. Then you've got less leaves to get the powdery mildew. You've got better air circulation. It's easier to see your fruit. It's easier to help pollinate the flowers. So it's like a win-win all around. It's the other reason I love doing the squash, because it brings in so many bees. So we want to do everything to increase the airflow, because lack of airflow is going to get you powdery mildew. Number 3 is to be aware. Data is your friend in the garden. I'm going to do another video about that in the future, about data, but just being aware, seeing what's going on. That was my main issue this year. I did plant vertically. I did have better spacing. Maybe not as good. Okay, let's be honest. Maybe not as good spacing as I could have, but I did go vertical. I did prune some of the leaves, but as I mentioned, I was not aware enough in my garden this year, getting overwhelmed with trying to do too many things. You should be going out and checking your plants daily, looking at the leaves, especially in the beginning of the season when you want to be looking under the leaves for signs of pests as well. So being aware of the garden and seeing what's going on is the best way to find problems early and deal with them before they get established, which is going to make it so much easier to get rid of them or get them under control. For the powdery mildew, in terms of looking for it, it's typically going to show up mostly on the tops of the leaves. As I mentioned, that doesn't mean that's the only place it's going to go. It could go underneath, and if it's established, it can go on the stems. But the first signs, like the first hint, is going to be on top of the leaves, which are easier to see, so that's working in your favor. Once you're seeing signs of damage, you want to get rid of those leaves. Cut them off, take them out. Do not put them in the compost. As I mentioned, the spores can stay for a long time. They could get in there, and then you've got the spores in your compost. And if you're putting that compost on your garden, you're pretty much ensuring that you're going to get the powdery mildew back. Cut off any infected leaves, and those need to go in the garbage. If, however, you're seeing it on perennial plants, like I mentioned, I had it on my peony. You can see that right here where it was all over the leaves. So if you're seeing it on a perennial plant, if it's past the flowering season, which in the case of my peonies it was, cut them down. Once you've found and removed any of the infected pieces or leaves of the plant, next we have to move on to treatment, which is number 4. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to apply a follicular spray. So as I mentioned, it is a follicular disease for the most part, and there are many things that you can use. You can buy, like from the store, fungicides. That's definitely an option. I don't choose to do that. It is something that you can do, and it's your garden, you do you. So when it comes to homemade solutions, there's 2 main ones. There's a lot out there. It's like everybody's got their own version of how to deal with it. So it's worth checking out other recipes, checking out what other people say, and finding something that works for you in your garden. The 2 main ones that come up when you do a search are basically a baking soda and also a milk solution. I choose to use the baking soda. I have it here. So my glass bottles, I'll put a link to them in the description below, but I love these ones. I prefer the amber ones because it keeps out the light, and I use a lot of neem oil, but I'm going to use all of this right now. So it's not a huge deal, but the amber bottles are better if you can get them. So in that bottle, I have 2 cups of water. I have 1/8 of a teaspoon of neem oil, 1/8 of a teaspoon of dish soap, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. So that's what we're gonna spray on. The neem oil is good because it's antibacterial and it works on a lot of things in the garden. We have the soap because we need the soap to act as a suffocant, I can't remember how to say it, I'll write it on the screen, to basically help the oil mix into the water. And then the baking soda is kind of the key player in this. The other solution that you can use is a milk solution. I don't even know what to recommend to you guys. So in terms of the milk solution, I have seen so many different recipes, ranging all the way from a 9:1 ratio, 9 parts water to 1 part milk, to a 60-40, so 6 parts water to 40 parts milk, all the way down to a 2:1, so 2 parts water to 1 part milk. So there's a lot of variation there. So if you want to use the milk solution, go ahead and try different percentages and see what seems to work. If anyone has a tried and true recipe, let me know down in the comments below. because I'm always keen to try something different and to learn from each other and what's working in other gardens. You need to be spraying it every 7 to 10 days and make sure with both of the solutions, and making sure that you completely coat the leaf. If it rains, you're going to need to make sure once it's dry that you go out and reapply it. The thing that you need to be careful of if you are using neem oil like I do is not to be spraying it in the direct sun, because it can burn the leaves. But neem is always my go-to in the garden. Number 5. You want to be careful how you're fertilizing. You don't want to go and over-fertilize, because if you're over-fertilizing, it's going to stimulate the leaf production, and the newer leaves tend to be more susceptible to the powdery mildew. So you want to have like a slow and steady fertilizing going on, which is probably better for your plants anyway, to just kind of keep that constant, slow food coming in. So we basically need to make sure that we're giving the plant what it needs to thrive without sending it into hyperdrive. So that's also going to make the plant stronger if it's just kind of constant. So don't go just giving huge doses of fertilizing. Too much can be a bad thing for sure. Number 6, I don't have my other hands holding the camera. So number 6 is to choose resistant varieties. Now, typically with anything heirloom, which is the only things that I grow, they are going to be a little bit more susceptible to things. So it's not necessarily it's not an option that I choose. I'm going to plant the heirlooms that I love. But if you are struggling with it and you're not an heirloom snob like me, then you can go ahead and get resistant varieties, and that's going to make your life a whole lot easier. It doesn't mean that you don't do number 1 through 5, but it is going to drastically help reduce the chance that you're going to have a huge infestation of powdery mildew. So leaves that are starting to get really infected like this, or sickly looking ones, or any of the ones that have a lot of the spores on it, we are going to want to get rid of those. So I have my trusty Hori blade. I will put a link to it below. I love this thing. It's my everything garden tool. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of these out and set them aside, because as I mentioned, we do not want these in the compost. Okay, so I got most of the leaves out, found another pumpkin, which is fantastic. And these ones are looking great. So now we're going to treat these leaves and hopefully keep them protected. There are so many more fruit that are going along this vine, so it's fantastic. So all we're going to do is give it a swirl and then get spraying. And you want to thoroughly coat all of the leaves. Don't mind the weeds, obviously. I haven't. Okay, so I'm gonna keep spraying all of these and get them fully coated. Now we get the cicadas singing. So one thing I have noticed is anytime you're using baking soda, or if you've got diatomaceous earth mixed in a solution, sometimes the nozzle does clog up. I'm still on the hunt for a great spray bottle that does not clog. So if you know of one, again, let me know in the comments below, because I need that. We have a garbage pile there of a whole bunch of leaves. And all the other leaves are nicely coated. Now we wait. As I mentioned, it can get on all different parts of the plant. This was actually a volunteer tomato that showed up and got itself some powdery mildew. So this guy's got to go. Close up on the tomato leaf. I really hope that you guys found that helpful and that it helps you in your quest to rid your garden of powdery mildew. If you liked it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, because YouTube loves that and it does help me reach more people. And I would really appreciate it if you would. If you have any questions, or if you've got a tried and true recipe for dealing with powdery mildew, go ahead and leave it in the comments so that I can see it and everybody else can see it, and then we learn from each other, because this is all about building community and learning about how to grow more food. I've got to go harvest these squash and get some other stuff done in the garden. As always, go out there and enjoy the little things and make food grow. Bye, plant nerds.